Okay, we've got some data being served up. Let's see if we could go consume it using React. So back to the front end. I'll close these files. All right, so back to our front end. How are we going to display this using React? So we know about, in the source folder, we know about these, the basic setup. We have the index file, which is referring to the main TSX. The main TSX is calling the app component, which has all this information about Vite, which we'll fix in a minute. But what I want to do is go into our source folder, and we're going to add a new file called foodlist.tsx. So this is to have a little list, have it list out our food, and then I'll just build the basic structure. So this is going to be a React functional component called food list, opening closing parentheses, opening brace. We're going to have a return statement in there, no surprise. And then in the end, what I want to do is export a default food list component. Okay, so we need to bring the data in to be able to print this out, and we've done this with other JSON, but it was set up in a different way. We weren't grabbing it from a server. We had a file that was residing locally in this project, so it's going to be just a little bit different in the way we access it. Now, in .NET, specifically full stack, we would put in a statement at the top that said something to the effect of .model, and then whatever the name of the thing was, so Marriott Food, so in this case, and it would bind that to the form. Well, we're using two different technologies now, and so we can't use that app model syntax. We want the same thing, we want the same result, but we have to do it in a different way. As it turns out, React has its own version of models, and so what we do is in the source folder, we're going to right click and add a new folder, and React's version of models is something called types. Now, this is a name we're giving it. It could be called something different, but that's just what they chose to call it. Okay, and so in the types folder, I'm going to create a new kind of file. The name of the file is going to be food.ts. So this is still a TypeScript file, but it's just a food, and then we're basically going to build a model. And the way that we do that in React convention is to say export type food and set that equal to, in curly braces, how this file is going to look. So what do we have? Now this part is critically important. We need to have the same thing that we have exactly in our food type that's going to be passed in the JSON objects. Or if you think about the running JSON that we're receiving from the server, maybe I'll just leave this running for a few minutes while we look at this. I need to have this, and this. The food ID, the event name, the vendor, and the food rating, and it needs to match exactly. Now, you may notice, hopefully you do notice, that this is starting with lowercase letters. Food ID starts with lowercase letter, event name, vendor, food rating, all begin with a lowercase letter. If we look at our code over here, that's not the case. They started with an uppercase letter. But as we move them into this JSON format, the standard as we move them into React is to name them with the lowercase letters, and so it makes that conversion. And on the React side, and I know this from painful experience, they have to start with the lowercase letter. Otherwise, it doesn't work right. And so we're lining this up with this. What are these entries? Food ID, event name, vendor, food rating. So as we create these different types in TypeScript, in React, we say food ID was the first field, and what type of information in it is it? It's just a number, okay, semicolon. Okay, the next one is event name, colon. That's a string. Okay, the next one, vendor. What type of information is that? Also a string. And then event rating is a number. And this is what a food looks like. We've defined the model, so to speak, here in our types folder in this file called food TS. Let's save that. So now we have what a food looks like. All right. Again, those names need to line up exactly. Okay, so now that we have a food type, back to our food list component is the word I was looking for. I can import a food from, and then it'll hopefully IntelliSense for me here, the types folder, and in the types folder, it's a food object. So now we've brought a food, just like we imported the models in .NET, we've brought the food type into this class for us to be able to use, or this component for us to be able to use. Well, if we're going to get this to be able to print out, let's actually go in and build our little return. So we drop in here React fragment, and then in there I'm going to put a heading in there that says this is Marriott Food, and in that Marriott Food I can put in a little table, or below that Marriott Food I can put a little table, put in our head tag. In there I can have a row, in there I can have the different table headers, and so event name is the first one. We won't print out the ID. The vendor, and what was our third one? The actual food rating. So that's what our table is going to look like. And then of course we can have in here our table body. Now we know, because we've done it before in previous videos, that we're going to use the map function to go grab all the data to be able to print it, right? But where does that object sit? How do we get it in there, right? And so what we need to do is to build similar to what we did when we were listing out the movie objects and whatnot. It'll be the same idea. We're going to have in here data associated with this component. And so data associated with the component, if we want it to stay state-wise, right, with the component, we want the component to have a property or properties to store data, then the typical way of doing that is to set state of this object. And so we come in just like we've done before and build a const, and this one is going to use state, and so we are going to have here a list of foods, and then we're going to create a way to set those foods. So set foods is going to be our method to do that. And then we say, what is the default state for the foods? And so this one gets a little bit trickier, but we're going to use state, which it won't recognize at first, and we can go in and say, do you want to import state, use state from React? And we do. Then it recognizes use state, and we say, okay, so in this case, the use state is going to be attached to a food object, in a food array. So an array of food objects is a better way of saying that. Okay, that's what's going to come in as our default, and at first our array is just going to be blank, is what we're saying. All right. Now, do I expect that to make sense to you right off the bat? Maybe not. But it's the same general idea we've used before. We're setting up a variable, right? But it's going to be tied to this component called foods, and then we create the method to be able to go in and modify what's in there. And then we set the initial state to a food array, but initially it's going to be blank. All right, so we will now take this and populate it and actually do something with it to get that data in there starting in the next video. Spencer, out.